Welcome and welcome back to Maps Tutoring, where we look at key English exam skills. We are exploring the conflict collection from the Edexcel anthology. In today's video, we will be analysing A Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles, and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. A Poison Tree by William Blake centers around what happens when someone chooses to hold on to anger. The poem opens with a juxtaposition of outcomes by showing a contrast between anger ending after the speaker chooses to talk about it and anger growing after the speaker chooses not to talk about it. William Blake was not only a poet but an artist also. He illustrated the fatal outcome of repressed anger in the image of a man outstretched beneath a tree. Blake was part of an intellectual movement called Romanticism. In part, it centered around the appreciation of nature and focused on the imagination, emotion, and the content was often derived from autobiography. A Poison Tree is part of a collection of poems called Songs of Innocence and of Experience, which, as stated by Blake in the subtitle, explores the contrary states of the human soul. During his life, he was considered a dissenter, choosing to go against convention. His religious beliefs are an example of this. He identified as a Christian, but also embraced a spiritualism that went against the established church. Christian symbolism is seen throughout his poetry and artwork, so look out for that in this poem. The statement in the subtitle, "The Two Contrary States of the Human Soul," can be linked to the juxtaposition in Blake's opening stanza, where it is evident that the speaker is capable of forgiveness, but instead chooses the opposite with fatal effects for the subject of his anger. A Poison Tree portrays conflicting states of emotion in the opening, forgiveness and unforgiveness, and elaborates on how unforgiveness breeds and escalates a conflict between two people into something poisonous, eventually leading to death. Therefore, the poem could be interpreted as a cautionary tale, warning its readers to choose the path of forgiveness. On the other hand, it could be argued that it is glorifying anger because the speaker is unrepentant and says, "Glad I see my foe outstretched beneath a tree." The fact that this is the desired outcome of the speaker might suggest this. We could speculate that ultimately it leaves the moral of the story in the hands of the reader's own moral compass. The poem is organized into quatrains, meaning there are 4 lines in each stanza. It is useful to consider the specific idea expressed in each quatrain. Each quatrain depicts a different stage of events. The story is told retrospectively using past tense, but the events are in chronological order. This familiar form makes the narrative of the poem easy to understand, whilst the meaning remains complex. The opening stanza emphasizes the introspective nature of the poem with the repetition of the singular first-person pronoun I at the start of every line. The main subject, anger, is emphasized by being the only word that is polysyllabic in the stanza, with every other word being monosyllabic. The fact that it takes a little bit longer to say angry compared to every other word in the stanza may point to the greater amount of time the speaker spent considering and fostering his anger, leading to its growth. The abundance of monosyllabic words in the first stanza adds to the simplicity of the poem despite its complex subject matter. Furthermore, the AABB rhyme scheme adds to this simplicity. It is reminiscent of a nursery rhyme because this is their typical rhyme scheme, and this suggests this poem, like a nursery rhyme, is didactic, meaning it is seeking to teach a specific moral lesson. The use of enjambment between the third and fourth stanza suggests premeditation in the speaker's enemy, who he refers to as his foe, stealing the apple. The two lines, "and he knew it was mine, and into my garden stole," depict the same idea. However, the break created using enjambment suggests a deliberate pause in the foe before stealing to emphasize he meant to cause harm. This perhaps justifies the speaker's glee to see his foe dead, outstretched beneath a tree. This dramatic ending shows the danger of anger left to fester and grow. The fact that the apple was in his garden emphasizes that his anger was hidden, because symbolically in the Bible, which informs many of Blake's references, gardens can represent the inner self. Blake uses an extended metaphor, which commences with the phrase, "my wrath did grow." This is of course quite apt and done deliberately, as the metaphor depicts the growth of a tree that bears a poisonous apple to represent the speaker's brewing anger. The use of sibilants in the second stanza reflects the sinister nature of his anger as it begins to mature. He speaks of soft, deceitful wiles. The adjective deceitful is key here in characterizing the speaker's ill will and manipulative nature. The noun wiles communicates his desire to weaponize his anger and foreshadows the luring of his foe towards the deadly apple. The use of polysyndeton, which is the repetition of the conjunction and, suggests the speaker's meditation of this scheme was relentless. Additionally, this builds a picture of accumulation and build-up of pent-up anger. Again, the language, by choosing the conjunction and, is simple, in keeping with Blake's style in this poem. Although the speaker's premeditation is apparent, the use of the possessive pronoun mine and possessive determiner my serve as justification because they emphasize his enemy's guilt because he knowingly steals from the speaker. Blake uses biblical motifs throughout this poem. The apple represents temptation, as seen in the book of Genesis when Eve is tempted by the snake to eat the forbidden fruit. The garden represents an inward and protected place because after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they were banished from the garden and angels were placed to guard it so they would not be able to re-enter the garden. The tree represents judgment because Jesus Christ died hanging on a tree with his arms outstretched, being judged not for his own sin but the sins of the world. In A Poison Tree, Blake borrows some of this imagery, with the enemy depicted outstretched beneath a tree as judgment for his own wrongdoing. The influence of Christianity is apparent in Blake's work because, as mentioned earlier, he did identify himself as a Christian, but his beliefs ventured beyond the mainstream interpretation and he experimented with other sects of spiritualism. This complexity is apparent in the poem because on one hand it does offer a simple cautionary tale, however, its speaker also unashamedly delights in behaviour that is morally wrong, and Blake does not punish him for this. That's all for today. I hope you found this video helpful. If you've made it this far, leave a like and comment your own thoughts on the poem. Thank you for watching and subscribe to keep up with future uploads.